diving into today is right up your alley. It's from the Cool Down, and it talks about this new technology that's not just fighting air pollution, but actually using it to create valuable stuff.
What caught my eye here is how this innovation ties into some major trends we're seeing, from the electric vehicle boom to the whole push for a more sustainable circular economy. It's a really fascinating case study.
Okay, so let's break it down. The article describes this device that captures carbon dioxide, and get this, it's inspired by the lotus flower. Apparently, the way those flowers repel water but still absorb what they need to thrive, it sparked an idea.
Exactly. They essentially mimicked the lotus flower's surface structure to create this special material. It grabs the carbon dioxide from the air, which is the first crucial step. But here's where it gets really interesting. It's what they do with the CO2 after they capture it.
Right. It's not just about trapping pollution. It's about turning it into something we can actually use.
They're actually able to convert the captured CO2 into two incredibly useful products: carbon monoxide and formic acid.
Let's start with the carbon monoxide. Now, I know what you're thinking. Isn't that stuff dangerous?
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, in high concentrations, it can be, but it's also a crucial ingredient in a lot of industrial processes, including...
Purification of nickel, which just happens to be a key component in the batteries that power electric vehicles.
And with the demand for EVs skyrocketing, finding cleaner ways to source those battery materials is a huge deal.
Absolutely. It speaks to that interconnectedness of sustainability cleaning up one industry while supporting the growth of another. But it doesn't stop there. Let's talk about that other output: formic acid.
Okay, confession time. I had to look this one up. But it turns out formic acid is in a ton of stuff. Textiles, for example.
Yeah.
I bet you've got some clothing items right now that were made using a process that involved formic acid.
It's one of those unsung heroes of the chemical industry.
The article specifically mentioned its use in livestock feed as a preservative and antibacterial agent, which, who knew, right?
It might seem like a small detail, but it illustrates a larger point. This technology has the potential to make a whole bunch of industries just a little bit greener. And that's a big part of what the circular economy is all about, right? Taking something that was once considered waste and turning it into a valuable resource.
Now, for those who haven't stumbled upon the concept yet, circular economy might sound a bit like jargon, but it's a really cool idea.
It's basically the opposite of our traditional linear economy, where we take resources, make stuff, use it, and then toss it. In a circular economy, the goal is to keep those resources in play for as long as possible, kind of like nature does.
Exactly. It's like turning the whole system into a closed loop, where waste is seen as a design flaw, not an inevitability. Which brings us to the bigger picture. How does this invention fit into the broader fight against climate change? I mean, we often hear about things like planting trees to capture carbon, right?
Right. And those are incredibly important strategies for carbon sequestration. But what's so exciting about this new technology is its potential for a much more immediate and localized impact. Think about it. Imagine being able to capture CO2 right at the source of the emissions, like at factories or power plants.
So instead of that CO2 going into the atmosphere, it's captured and turned into something useful. And the article did mention the scientist behind this, Yang, wants to build a larger prototype to see how well it scales.
And that's key, because if we're talking about making a real dent in global emissions, scalability is everything. But even beyond that, what I find really interesting is the mindset behind this innovation. Remember that quote from Yang about wanting to create a material that quickly grabs carbon dioxide?
Yeah, it really stuck with me.
To me, that speaks to a sense of urgency, a recognition that we need solutions and we need them fast. It's that proactive approach that really excites me.
It's funny you should say that, because I was just thinking so much of the conversation around climate change can feel kind of, well, depressing. But this is different, isn't it? It's solution-oriented, it's creative, kind of elegant even.
Absolutely. And it highlights how we can move beyond just reducing our negative impact to actually creating a positive feedback loop. We're not just mitigating harm, we're turning a problem into a resource. That shift in perspective is incredibly powerful.
Okay, so we've talked about the technology, the benefits, how it all fits into the bigger picture. Now I want to hear from you, dear listener. What's resonating with you most?
Imagine you're in a room with potential investors. What aspect of this technology would you highlight to really get them on board?
I think I'd lead with the sheer ingenuity of turning pollution into profit. Imagine telling investors, we found a way to take something everyone sees as a problem and turn it into valuable products that are already in high demand. That's a compelling story, right?
It really is, and it speaks to that sweet spot of sustainability and economic viability, which is what we need to see more of. But it also gets me thinking, this isn't the only game in town when it comes to carbon capture, right? So how does this tech stack up against some of the other methods we hear about?
That's a great question. And to be honest, the article didn't dive too deep into comparisons. It did mention that Yang sees this technology as potentially cheaper and faster than some existing carbon capture methods. But of course, more research is needed. I mean, there's a difference between a cool idea in the lab and something that can be scaled up to make a real difference globally.
Exactly. And that's where things get really interesting, right? Because even if the science is solid, there are so many other factors that come into play. Will there be enough investment to bring it to market? What kind of regulations will be needed to encourage adoption?
It's like that old saying, invention is the easy part. It's innovation actually getting it out into the world and having a real impact. That's the real challenge.
It reminds me of that point we made earlier about interconnectedness. This technology doesn't exist in a vacuum. Its success hinges on so many other factors: economic, political, even social acceptance.
Which brings us to our final thought for you today. Remember how this whole thing was inspired by the lotus flower? It makes you wonder what other elegant solutions. Nature has already figured out solutions that we might be able to borrow for our own sustainability challenges. It's like a whole world of biomimicry just waiting to be explored.
Absolutely. There's so much we can learn from nature's design playbook if we just pay attention.
So the next time you're marveling at the natural world, think about the hidden technologies it might hold and how we might be able to use them to create a more sustainable future. Until next time, keep those brain cells buzzing.